Hey everybody, this is Tracy here for another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here to recap Iyanla Fix My Life, Season 6, Episode 3, Crack Addiction, Abandonment, Seven Brothers, Part 2. So I struggled so hard in that last recap. So I apologize to you guys if it seemed crazy and all over the place, but it was all over the place. I mean, the episode itself and the bickering and everything between the brothers, but hopefully we can learn a little bit more because the editing on the last episode was just leaving out a lot of stuff. It was confusing a lot of stuff, but we're going to try it again and see if we can do better with part 2. So the show starts out with Iyanla, and she's down in the kitchen cooking breakfast for the brothers while they're upstairs arguing over how each of them expressed themselves and the things that were said at the gathering in the first episode. And so Marquise and Melvin, they're about to fight because they were arguing, and Melvin was trying to explain how he expresses himself and that it can sometimes come off harsh, but he doesn't mean anything about it. And then he was kind of like trying to tell Marquise that, you be all up in our face and, just they all want to be heard is what it basically comes down to. But then Marquise takes it there and calls Melvin a bitch. Now, don't no gay man want to be called a bitch or called out his name. And so the two of them, they act like they was about to fight and throw down. But what I noticed about Marquise is he talk all that trash and he act all big and bad. But when Marvin went over there to, back him up and tell him to chill out, he wasn't trying too hard to get away from Marvin. Because I'm thinking like he could have just flicked Marvin off. But none of that was happening. So Iyanla was like, what the hell going on up there? So Mama got to take her apron off and come on. Well, I don't think she took the apron off, but she put that spatula down and she went upstairs to break that fight up. And it was just so, like, the way she's playing this show is like she's giving them that motherly love that none of them have really had. And then also I want to point out that I noticed that in this house that Iyanla's in now, because in the Memphis episode, she was in the kitchen cooking breakfast for Memphis' mom and her so they can sit down and talk. And so I like that little feel that she has going on because, y'all know food is good for the soul, and anytime you can talk over a good meal, you should have some good results. So Mama Iyanla went up there to break up that fight and see what was going on. And so she was trying to talk to Marquise, who was still pretending like he was being held back by Marvin. And then Melvin over on the bed and the other two brothers holding him down because he really looked like he was about that. And he said, you might beat me, but I ain't going to back down from you. So they're trying to hold him down and everything. And it was hilarious. So then he was yelling and carrying on. So then Iyanla was like, shut up. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. And I was like, all right, now, Iyanla, really your kids. And them some grown men you talking to. But she finally get them to calm down. So first she talks to Marquise and she tells him that he's treating his brother the same way that the adults in the group homes treated him, and that he is not the ruler over them, and he's got to allow them to express themselves and voice their opinions and say what it is that they're on their mind, and he has to be willing to listen. So after she gets through talking to him, she sends him downstairs to butter the biscuits that she had in the oven. So he go downstairs and he was buttering the biscuits. I was like, this is so cute. So then she goes in to talk to Melvin, and she tells him that he fights to be right. Like, he just wants to be heard. And she tells him, he has a couple of strikes against him, or not strikes, but things that will always, like, he have to battle through. He's black, he's male, he's gay, and he's coming from dysfunction. And so Melvin says that in foster care, he was called a faggot as early as 10 years old. And whenever he looked at a man, people would always like judge him and say, why you looking at him? He wants to have sex with you. Like, what you doing? So basically trying to say that he brought on him any sexual abuse that he experienced. Then we have McQuell, and I don't know how to pronounce his boy name. It's Mikuel, and he's with Michael and Marvin, and so they're talking about how angry Marquise is and how he lets his anger get the best of him, and without any regard to how it will impact the others, so they're trying to hold it together. And he's saying that, if something happened to him, then what are they going to do? And he's not even considering the fact that he has 4 kids of his own, who will be forced to live the same type of life that they're living, where they're trying to survive without him. So downstairs, Marquise is, like I said, buttering them biscuits when Iyanla comes in with Melvin, and the brothers face each other and apologize for the way, that they talk to each other. They're not talking to each other, they're talking at each other. And so they both admit that they could do better. And Marquise admits that he doesn't understand Melvin, and that's part of the frustration in their communication. So they end up hugging it out, and this makes Iyanla happy. She was like, yeah, this is going to be a good day. So I think Iyanla liked this whole situation, like mothering these boys, and because she's just having too much fun on this episode, despite the seriousness of what's going on. So at breakfast, Iyanla tells them that what happens to one of them happens to all of them, so they need to be mindful of that. And she also says that Marquise wants someone to kill him, or he says he wants someone, or he acts as though he wants someone to kill him so that the pain will go away. But however, she doesn't think that he really wants to die. He just wants everything to be right for a change. Then she turns to Melvin and Marvin and tells them that they are at, the most important age in their life. And that and actually I guess you could include McQuell in that scenario also, because I think he's like 30 years old. And so she says that between 33 and 35 is called the dark night of the soul. And it's when everything comes upon you and you have to choose which way to go. Either you're going to go into the dark, or you're going to find the light and do good things with your life. So she says that they really need to start reflecting on where they want their future to go. And even the brothers that are older than that age, they're like in it right now, and they just got to make a decision. And it's also not too late for Michael, even though he's older. So when Melvin tells Marcus that if something happens to him, it only adds to their pain, and he needs to start considering that. And Marcus says that they're all grown, intelligent men that should be able to make it without him if he were to die. And I'm like, come on now, Marcus, you can't be acting like that. So Iyanla says that they all have a lot of education, so they need to act like they've learned something. So I guess what she was saying was that they graduated from the School of Hard Knocks, and so they need to use the survival skills that they learned out in the streets to bond together and fix their relationships and be better brothers and fathers to their own children. And so she tells them that they need to stop focusing on the negative all the time and think about, the positive things that can come from this entire situation. Then Iyanla asks Melvin what it is that he wants to do. And so he kind of like perked up and everything and says that he wants to do something where he can help people, and guide people and help them fulfill their dreams. So Iyanla told him to close his eyes and tell everybody, or tell her what it is that he wants. And so then he said, I want everything. And then he opened his eyes, and she said, no, close your eyes and be honest and open. So she got up and she went around the table to him. And she says, just speak. Whatever comes to your mind, say it. And so he says, I want a good life. I want a family. I want a car, and then he kind of like felt embarrassed that he was, said he wanted a car. And she says, okay, if you want a car, you want a car. You want the basic things that everybody else wants. And then she said, but what do you really want? And then he says that he wants to be accepted. Lord have mercy. And Iyanla told them, life is screaming at us all the time. What do you want? What do you want? And all we have to do is be ready to answer. But so many of us never fulfilled our dreams or go where we're intended to go in life because we're afraid to speak our deepest dreams and things that we want, and that's why we never draw those things to us in our life. And I was like, that was deep. I'm gonna take a note of that, write that down so I can remember that. So then Melvin breaks down crying, and then Iyanla gives him another one of them deep hugs, one of them grandma face shoved in the bosom hugs that she's been doing a lot of on this season. And so she talks him through the pain and lets him know that it's okay, because like once you release it to the universe, the pain can no longer hurt you. So then she asks the guys, if they're okay if she brings someone new to the group. And so she was just building it up like it was some kind of specialist or something that was coming in, but it really was their dad and Michael Sr. that was coming to join them. So they move into another room to play a game called Breakthrough Bingo when the dad comes in, and they didn't really seem moved one way or the other when daddy came in. And so he says that he's never played any games with them. And I'm like, my God, like you ain't never threw a baseball or a football to your child. You ain't never went to the park and played basketball with them, taught them how to play spades or checkers or chess or anything like that. I'm just like, this is just crazy that people can just bring children into the world and abandon them. And then also I got to thinking, because like I told you guys, that first episode had my head spinning. Was the dad on drugs, or was just the mother on drugs, and the dad just loved her sugar honey iced tea so much that he just put up with her? Because now I'm starting to think that maybe he wasn't on drugs, or if he was on drugs, it wasn't to the extent that the mother was. But anyway, they sit down to play this game, and the way you play the game is that instead of calling out numbers, she would call out a word. And then if you had experienced whatever that word was, then you mark that on your bingo card. And so the first thing that she called out was abandoned. So Michael Jr. feels like, he's the black sheep of the family, and that although he's the oldest, they don't treat him that way. And he feels like they pretty much just ignore him all the time. And then Michael says that he doesn't know what his disability is. He was just always told that he was slow. And it kind of reminded me of my daughter that has autism. So she's 32 years old, but about 6 or 7 years ago, she passed out, and we had to call the paramedics and everything. So she ended up going to a neurologist. So the neurologist ran all these tests on her, and he came back and he says, I see nothing that says that your daughter is autistic. And so I said, well, she's been autistic since she was 3 years old, and she was actually diagnosed with autism because she had a seizure. And he came back and said, okay, well, at this point, you done taught her to be autistic, so we just gonna go with the fact that she's autistic. He says, but I really don't think your daughter is autistic, that you have made her autistic because of the false diagnosis that you received when she was younger. And so, of course, when I told my sister and my parents, and they got all upset and everything, but I was like, hey, at what point, what can we do about it now? And so that's kind of what I felt Michael was saying, was like, everybody done told me I'm slow, so I believed I was slow, and so I just lived my life as being a slow person. And so he said that, he was at the head of the line, but then he keep getting pushed back. Like nobody treats him like he's the older brother, and he never had the responsibility of trying to help them. And I'm like, Lord have mercy, they done made the boy slow. Like it don't even, his mind over matter. And Michael, if you don't believe you slow, you ain't got to be slow. So then Iyanla basically tells them that because he is the oldest, he's had it the hardest, and that theoretically he's been working to hold the family together without any tools to do so. And that, she thinks that he's done a good job, and they've got to start giving him more credit. So then the next one was verbal abuse. So McQuail, says that he used to get cursed out for no reason. And Iyanla asked him, like, well, what do you mean? So he was giving this example of when he was in the foster home, and like he would just say something simple, like, oh, it's a pretty day outside. And this wasn't the example he gave, but I didn't write the example down. Like he might say, oh, it's real pretty outside. And then the people in the foster home, the other kids, would just cuss him out. Like, how the hell you know it's a pretty day outside? Who told your dumb A, just cuss him out for no reason at all. And so he talks about, how that really hurt his self-esteem and hurt his feelings. And, he felt like he couldn't express himself. So then she said homeless. And then they all raised their hand and said that they've been homeless. homeless. And then I guess when Marquise had came and rescued them, and get them to run away or whatever, they were sleeping like abandoned cars on the side of the road, not knowing where they were going to get their next meal from. And we also learned that they have lived in combined, all the brothers together throughout their life, have lived in a total of 85 different foster homes and group homes. I'm just like, my God, they were just passing these kids around. So then the daddy says that hearing their stories is really pissing him off because he wasn't there and they never told him, that any of this was going on and he didn't know what to do to save them. And Iyanla was like, well, I guess you are pissed off because you weren't there, because they went through this because you weren't there. Like, you need to acknowledge that. But daddy was just sitting there like he was just some man that Iyanla pulled off the street and told, say, come listen to this conversation. So the next word was guilty. So Marquise raises his hand and Iyanla tells him that, to come and stand back to back with her, and like she was going to be his support system. And so they kind of like interlocked arms, and she told him like lean back. And so he was leaning back on her and she was like, I'm going to help you bear your burden. And so he says that he feels that he put his brothers in the same situation as their parents put him, and that he abandoned his brothers, and that he was guilty of not being strong enough for them, not standing up for them when he was supposed to. I think it's going to come out that what Marquise's issue is that he feels guilty about Miguel's death. And I think it's going to come out that either he was there and he didn't do anything, or he was afraid to come and help whatever the situation was with Michael and Miguel when Miguel got killed. So that's just me thinking that that's what the whole situation is going to come down to. And so, like I said, daddy just sitting there like he don't know what's going on, because I'm thinking, why didn't you get up, daddy, and go stand and tell Iyanla, I'll stand in for you? But instead of daddy doing it, Miguel gets up and takes Iyanla's place. I'm like, daddy, you just continuing to drop the ball. Marquise continues, saying that he hasn't been a good father to his kids. And Iyanla tells him to admit that he's guilty of having anger and rage towards his dad. And then Marvin gets up to come and support Miguel, so now the both of them are standing there. And then Iyanla went over to the dad, and then the dad tried to get up, and Iyanla was like, well, where you think you going? But what he was really doing was getting up to go over there. He finally realized that that was his place to be over there supporting them. And then it got really, really, really emotional, because when the dad went over there and then he started hugging his boys, and I'm thinking this is probably the first time this man has ever hugged his kids, and so they get to crying and carrying on. I'm like, Lord, where's my tissue? Because y'all know I can't stand to see men cry. So I'm like, Lord Jesus, so that was just like a whole emotional scene, and she was just pulling it all out of them. But just to see the father holding on to his son, like he wasn't just hugging him, he was like holding on for dear life, like if he let him go, that they all were just going to drop down to the ground. So that was a good part. That was a little breakthrough moment. So now it's time for some truth. So then the daddy, in the beginning, he was looking like he didn't know what was going on, but now it's time for mama. So the daddy said that the mother was in California in rehab, but Iyanla was like, what? Like how she had all these children if she was in rehab? So the daddy said, well, all I know, she said she was going to California, and then I guess she didn't come back. So daddy seemed like he's been in denial. And, y'all like, you got 8 kids over a span of 10 years. She wasn't in rehab all them years. Y'all was making babies some of that time. So then Iyanla says that there's no way that she would keep sleeping with a woman who keeps abandoning her kids, and after the second or third child, she would have cut it off, and that there wouldn't have been no more sex with this woman. She said, because something isn't adding up. And I agree with Iyanla that something isn't adding up. Like, there's a lot of holes in this story, and we just need some truth to come out by part 3. So we finally get to meet the mom, and everybody on social media was saying that the mama looked like Frankie, Keisha Cole mama, that Iyanla had to put out a tweet and it was like, no, this woman is not Frankie, and she is not related to Frankie, but she had that Frankie wig on. No. But mama was so detached, it wasn't even funny. She was totally, totally detached. So she said that she got married at 22 and that they had their first child 6 months later, And Iyanla said, well, why did you keep having all them children? And so she said that Michael's mother had 7 children. So he has 7 siblings and he wanted to be in a big family. But I thought the man said that his daddy wasn't around. So if his mom had all these kids from different men, or she was struggling to raise her kids, why would he, or maybe he wanted to have all those kids to prove that he could be a good father, but he didn't have the tools that he needed to be a good father, so he shouldn't have been out there procreating the way he was. And so she said he wanted this big family, so she says that she couldn't be a mother because she was smoking crack. She could make them babies, have sex, make them babies, but she couldn't take care of them because that crack pipe was too important to her. So, like I said, the mother is so disconnected as Iyanla goes down the list of all these kids and what they've grown through. She just seems so unbothered. She was sitting there like, yeah, I was like, Lord Jesus. So then we meet the daughter, Kizzie, who is 38. So I'm thinking Kizzie may not be Michael's daughter. I'm thinking Kizzie may be another child that the mother had when she met him. And so she says that she feels that her mother doesn't like her and that she loved the boys more than her. And when she gets going on and on about how the mother was always there for the boys but not for her, Iyanla said, pump your brakes. She was like, which boys are you talking about? She said, my brothers, all my brothers, she was always there for them. And Iyanla was like, girl, I got to go get one of them boys and bring them in here because you are so confused and so out of line right now. So we learned that the mother, and I can't remember what the mother's name was, but she gave the daughter to her mother. And then I guess her mother was like poisoning her mind about the mom and about, these other sons that she had. And so I think we're going to get into that in part 3 because we kind of just like hinted around it. So when Iyanla went and got Michael and brought Michael in there, the girl was saying, she was always with them. And Iyanla was like, tell her where y'all grew up at. And so, he was telling her, like, we were in foster home and group home and we've even been homeless. And Iyanla was like, have you ever been homeless? Have you ever been in foster care? And the girl was like, no, I haven't, but it doesn't make a difference because I wanted my mom and I wanted to be with my brothers and I wanted to grow up with them and I was denied that opportunity. And so she was like saying stuff like that totally didn't line up with the boy's story. And, she said that, she was definitely sold a lie because she thinks her brothers grew up with the mom while she was abandoned. So now she hates the brothers because she is jealous of a fake relationship that never even existed. So the bottom line is there is so many lies and deception and destruction. And Iyanla tells Kizzie that any woman who could birth 7 kids and walk away and that she basically has no clue who she is. So Kizzie, says that even though she had a better life, she still longed to be with the mother and the brothers. And kids in general are so resilient because they would rather live in the dirt and eat at the garbage can with their mother than to have a great life without their mother. And I just see that over and over and over. And I was actually watching an old episode of Dr. Phil this morning about this lady who keeps going to jail for writing bad checks, but she got 6 kids spread all over, and then the oldest daughter doesn't want anything to do with her, but the younger kids, they are dying for that relationship. And I'm just like, why as parents we can't get it together and do better for our kids, or stop having kids if we can't do better for them? So the episode ends with Marquise telling Kizzie that if he could care for his brothers at the age of 8, that she could have found them, since she was like 16 years old, I guess, when they found out. I was so lost. So she was like, I could not have found you. Like, even if I wanted to come to you guys, my grandmother wouldn't have allowed it. She wouldn't have allowed me to call. And so, like I said, I was so confused, like what the line of communication was, why he felt that Kizzie could have saved them, because I thought that was kind of delusional on his part, and he has like this distorted view of reality because he's convinced himself that he could have played the father for these kids when he really, and I wish Iyanla would just tell him that he was not the father of those kids so he can get the healing that he needs. And I think that in part 3 they need to bring the grandmama on this so we can see what part she played in it. But I don't know if everything is going to unravel in this last episode, if we need another episode, but it is only 3 parts. So whatever's going to wrap up is going to wrap up next week, and I'm going to be there for it. So guys, let me know what you thought about part 2 of this episode with the 7 broken brothers. Leave your comments below, rate the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.